When you think of someone playing a handheld pair of crash cymbals, what comes to your mind? Maybe a wind-up toy? Someone in a marching band doing crazy tricks? The viral YouTube video of a middle school student dropping a cymbal during the national anthem? I think cymbals are without a doubt the most expressive orchestral percussion instruments. Every time a note on the cymbals is played, it signifies a special moment in the music. A huge dramatic event, a burst of energy, or a sparkly sound effect. When one plays the cymbals, there's really no way to hide behind its expressive nature. To start, let's take a look at the way professional percussionists use different motion and coordination to play them. The variety of technique performers use when they play the cymbals is much more individual and unique than almost any other percussion instrument. Some like to use a big flourish, while others keep it more subdued but still make a great sound. Now, here's my impression of a wind-up toy playing the cymbals. You might notice that there's a few issues with this technique, or you might suspect that there's not much refinement to the way I'm putting the two cymbals together. Whether or not you notice some issues, join me while we go over the 4 main ingredients that make a great cymbal crash. Let's take a look at what happens to a cymbal in slow motion when it's struck. You'll notice that the cymbal starts to move and vibrate immediately as there is contact, and pretty soon after, the entire metal plate is activated. When we play two cymbals with our hands, the goal is to get the entirety of both plates vibrating with each note. The most common obstacle that a cymbal player must overcome is pockets of air getting trapped in between the two plates as they are struck together. Without giving it an opportunity to escape, it can have a huge impact on allowing the cymbals to activate fully. Essentially, playing a cymbal crash with an air pocket is like hitting together two non-vibrating pieces of metal, and the full range of color and sound that's possible on an instrument is lost. If we take a look at the wind-up toy cymbal technique again, you can imagine how air pockets might occur, since I'm not giving an opportunity for the air in between the two plates to escape. This way of playing in particular is ignoring the 4 main ingredients one should take into consideration when playing the cymbals. They are offset, angle, flam, and speed, or oafs. Knowing how and when to manipulate these 4 aspects is an endless pursuit for all orchestral percussionists. A cymbal player must know how much to offset the cymbals from each other when they make contact. Due to the curved nature of each plate, offsetting alone will already give an opportunity for the air in between the cymbals to escape, since the edges of the cymbals are not exactly lined up with each other. Once the cymbals are offset from each other, rotating one on an angle can help the air escape even more easily, especially in louder dynamics. When the cymbals make contact with each other in this way, something called a flam happens. A flam is when 2 notes are played in quick succession on a percussion instrument. We have the main note, and then something called a grace note that happens just before it. The word itself is actually a quasi-onomatopoeia, representing how it sounds. Phalam. If I rotate one plate on an angle like this, you'll see the top edge make contact just before the other. Depending on the exact angle you use when you hit the cymbals together, those 2 hits will happen more quickly or slowly. Once those are set up, the cymbal player must decide how slowly or quickly to throw the cymbals together. Each time a percussionist plays a note on the cymbals, they must use just the right combination of each of these techniques. And one small adjustment has a direct effect on all of the others. Countless variables might affect a percussionist's calculations, including physical aspects of the actual pair of cymbals that they use, the unique nature of each performance situation, and elements of the musical material itself. For this video, we'll look only at how different musical situations might affect a percussionist's cymbal technique. Let's focus on 3 general types of musical moments with cymbals. Of course, every note in a piece of orchestral music has some sort of special meaning and intention on its own. But these cover a good amount of the general repertoire. Loud notes happening in a big moment of a piece, notes that have a short duration and highlight a detailed or ongoing rhythm, and quiet notes that add a bit of magic sparkle on top of delicate textures. Some of my most favorite cymbal parts are where the percussionist plays only a few notes but caps off the most dramatic or climactic moments in a piece with a huge crash of the cymbals. These moments are like if you shook up a bottle of sparkling water, creating lots of pressure and tension. And then the cymbal crash happens when you actually open the bottle. A perfect musical example of this is in Anton Bruckner's 7th Symphony. The cymbal player must wait for 40 minutes until they get a chance to play. Beforehand, they have to make sure they don't look too bored, or get too distracted, or fall asleep, or get confused about where they are in the music. And then the big moment comes. And that's it. They only have one note to play out of an hour and 10 minutes of music. For these types of moments, I would use larger cymbals, like these ones that are 20 inches in diameter. Here's what they sound like if I use my wind-up toy technique without any consideration of offset, angle, flam, or speed. There's still some sort of sound made, but you might be able to hear a bit of slappiness, or air pockets. To make a better sound, I need to make some adjustments. In this video, all of these adjustments are based on the specific pairs of cymbals I'm using and my overall physicality when I play. They work for me in individual situations, but might not be the best way for everyone. The point is that as I show you these adjustments I'm making, you'll get a general idea of the things a cymbal player must explore, and not a prescription of some sort of correct technique. So, for me specifically playing these kind of notes on these cymbals, I would adjust this to a medium-high amount of offset, a high amount of angle, and a medium speed, which sounds like this. Here's a frequency chart of the notes I just played with those adjustments. It shows us the frequencies in the x-axis and how loud those frequencies are in the y-axis. What we get from looking at this is how prominent the low and mid frequencies are in this section based on the size of these spikes, and how complex the sound is based on the overall level of spikes in the high frequency section. For these notes, we see that the average level of the high frequencies are about even with those in the mid and lows, meaning it's a well-balanced and full way of executing this type of crash. If I compare this to the notes played with the wind-up toy technique, we see that both ways of playing give us a similar sound in the low and mid frequencies. But without making those adjustments, there is a significantly lower amount of higher frequencies with the wind-up toy technique. In addition to finding the right technique, the biggest challenge for a cymbal player when playing loud notes in big moments is lining up their note just right with the other instruments. Different orchestras like to delay the big moment to create as much tension as possible before the release. And oftentimes, there's not even any indication in the written music for this to happen. But the cymbal player must be tuned in to the musical instincts of the conductor and the orchestra as a whole and time their note perfectly, no matter how much anticipation or delay they have to account for. A perfect example of one of these moments is in Richard Strauss's Ein Heldenleben. There's a big single-note cymbal moment that comes about 2/3 of the way through the piece. If we zoom in on the full orchestral score in this moment, we can see the one note over here. And you might also notice that there's no indication of any slowdown or delay in the music just before it. I once played this piece with a professional orchestra, and I'd like to play you a recording from one of the rehearsals. This orchestra in particular liked to do a huge delay in the moment just before the cymbal note. I was aware of this pretty early on in the rehearsal process, but I still had trouble waiting long enough to line up with the rest of the ensemble, and I kept coming in too early. So I decided to go the opposite direction and play the note as late as I could to find the balance. Let me tell you, this experiment did not go well, and I ended up playing the note way too late. As you listen, you can follow along with this line in the score. If you don't know how to read music, then all you need to know is that when this line meets up with the circled note over there, the cymbals are supposed to play. Ouch. It's still a little painful to listen to that. Luckily for me, by the time we got to the actual performances of this piece, I was able to get it just right, and I learned a lot in the process. To cleanse our ears and our soul after listening to that recording, let's watch a different professional orchestra play this moment where the cymbal player gets it just right. It's also common in cymbal parts for the notes to display short bursts of rhythmic energy. They can even be a direct representation of sound from other objects, like swords clanking together in the middle of a fight. For these types of notes, I would use medium-sized cymbals, like these ones which are 18 inches in diameter. If I adjust and use a low amount of offset, a medium-low amount of angle and flam, and a high speed, it sounds like this. Looking at the frequency chart, we see a good amount of low frequencies and a nice balance of high frequencies to complement this. If I adjusted the technique again and used a medium amount of offset and a low speed, it sounds like this. The sound from this technique is not immediate enough. And as I mentioned earlier, the entire cymbal is not activated. For these types of notes, we want the cymbal to be activated as quickly as possible, which cannot happen if we use a slower speed. If we compare the frequency chart of these adjustments to the previous ones, we can see that it has around the same amount of low frequencies, but much less mid and high frequencies to balance it out. Not only is it not a quick enough sound, but it's much more dull. A perfect musical example of this type of crash is in a moment of the piece Romeo and Juliet by Pyotr Tchaikovsky. These cymbal notes actually represent a sword fight that happens between the characters Tybalt and Mercutio from the original story. A third type of cymbal crash are quiet notes that add some sparkle on top of delicate orchestral textures. It's like the composer wanted to sprinkle some magic dust over certain notes or moments in a piece. For these types of notes, I would use small cymbals, like these ones that are 16 inches in diameter. Since the sound is so delicate and quiet, we would not need to make that much of an adjustment to the technique to get the fullest sound out of the cymbals. If I used a low amount of offset, no angle, and a low speed, it sounds like this. If I adjusted to a medium amount of offset and a medium amount of angle and flam, it actually produces a similar balance of frequencies. But as I play it now, see if you can notice that the sound itself is activated very slowly. Due to the wider flam that I'm playing, the instruments don't speak as quickly, which in this case is not desirable. A perfect example of this type of musical moment is in Sergei Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. Notice how little motion the cymbal player uses. These are just a few highlights of what a cymbal player must take into account when they prepare their parts. Next time you hear the cymbals being played, see if you can figure out what type of musical moment it is and how that might affect the technique of the player. If you're looking for more information about how to play the cymbals, I recommend these other videos. Do you have any more questions about the cymbals, or maybe a favorite cymbal moment from a certain piece of music? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, be sure to check out my others and hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.